Hello and welcome to episode 17 of Learn English with Photos. My name is Jeffrey Hill and I'm going to be using some photos I've taken to help you improve your English vocabulary and practice your speaking skills. In October 2013 I spent a day in London with a small group of French students from the EM Normandy, where I work as an English teacher. In the morning we went on the London Eye, a visit described in episode 16 of Learn English with Photos. Then, after watching the changing of the guard at Horse Guards Parade, we made our way to the Tower of London, which we were all looking forward to visiting. Unfortunately, it started raining just as we arrived, and it didn't stop for the rest of the afternoon. This is London after all. Still, I was well equipped with waterproof clothing and managed to take some photos despite the murky weather. In fact, I hadn't been to the Tower of London since I was in primary school, nearly 50 years ago. I don't suppose the tower has changed much since then, but the surrounding area certainly has, with new city office buildings like the Shard and the Gherkin shooting up all over the place. The various exhibitions inside the tower have also evolved and now feature all sorts of interactive multimedia exhibits which would have been unheard of in the 60s. But before we talk about what there is to see and do, let's begin with a bit of history. Her Majesty's Royal Palace and Fortress, more commonly known as the Tower of London, is a historic castle on the north bank of the River Thames in central London, England. It was founded towards the end of 1066 as part of the Norman conquest of England. The White Tower, which gives the entire castle its name, was built by William the Conqueror in 1078 and was a resented symbol of oppression inflicted upon London by the new ruling elite. The castle was used as a prison from 1100 until 1952, although that was not its primary purpose. A grand palace early in its history, it served as a royal residence. As a whole, the tower is a complex of several buildings, set within two concentric rings of defensive walls and a moat. There were several phases of expansion, mainly under Kings Richard the Lionheart, Henry III and Edward I in the 12th and 13th centuries. The general layout established by the late 13th century remains despite later activity on the site. The Tower of London has played a prominent role in English history. It was besieged several times, and controlling it has been important to controlling the country. The tower has served variously as an armoury, a treasury, a menagerie, the home of the Royal Mint, a public records office, and the home of the crown jewels of the United Kingdom. In the late 15th century, the castle was the prison of the princes in the tower. Under the Tudors, the tower became less used as a royal residence, and despite attempts to re-fortify and repair the castle, its defences lagged behind developments in the field of artillery. The peak period of the castle's use as a prison was the 16th and 17th centuries, when many figures who had fallen into disgrace, such as Elizabeth I before she became queen, were held within its walls. This use has led to the phrase, "to be sent to the tower." Despite its enduring reputation as a place of torture and death, only 7 people were executed within the tower before the 2 world wars of the 20th century. Executions were more commonly held on the notorious Tower Hill to the north of the castle. In the latter half of the 19th century, institutions such as the Royal Mint moved out of the castle to other locations, leaving many buildings empty. In the First and Second World Wars, the tower was again used as a prison and witnessed the execution of 12 men for espionage. After the Second World War, damage caused during the Blitz was repaired and the castle reopened to the public. Today, the Tower of London is one of the country's most popular tourist attractions. The tower is now cared for by the Historic Royal Palaces charity and is protected as a World Heritage Site. We'd booked our tickets in advance on the internet to avoid the queues, but, no doubt because of the rain, there weren't any. There's plenty to see and do at the tower, and you could easily spend a whole day there. We just had an afternoon, so here are some of the highlights. One of the first things you notice are the men wearing the distinctive red and black uniforms. These are the Yeoman Warders, ceremonial guardians of the Tower of London, who are popularly known as Beefeaters. In principle, they are responsible for looking after any prisoners in the tower and safeguarding the British crown jewels. But in practice they act as tour guides and are a tourist attraction in their own right. The Ravens of the Tower of London are a group of captive common ravens which live in the tower. According to a superstition dating back over 300 years, there must be 6 of the birds, or else the monarchy, the kingdom and the tower itself will fall. Unfortunately, 2 of the birds were eaten by a fox in 2013, but luckily they had 2 extra ones at the time. The White Tower houses one of Britain's 3 royal armouries, the country's oldest museum and one of the oldest museums in the world. It's also one of the largest collections of arms and armour in the world. There are even suits of armour for horses. Many prisoners of the Tudors entered the Tower of London through the Traitors' Gate. The gate was built by Edward I to provide a water gate entrance to the tower. Prisoners were brought by barge along the Thames, passing under London Bridge, where the heads of recently executed prisoners were displayed on pikes. Queen Anne Boleyn and Sir Thomas More entered the tower by Traitors' Gate. The Bloody Tower acquired its name in the mid-16th century because it was believed to be the place where the princes in the tower were murdered by their uncle Richard, Duke of Gloucester, later to become King Richard III. The upper chamber has a display about the prince's disappearance. Despite popular fiction, the Tower of London never had a permanent torture chamber. In fact, only a tiny fraction of prisoners held at the tower were tortured. The tower's reputation for torture and imprisonment derives largely from 16th century religious propagandists and 19th century romanticists. The Privy Council had to sanction the use of torture, so it was not often used. Between 1540 and 1640, the peak of imprisonment at the tower, there were only 48 recorded cases of the use of torture. An exhibition at the bottom of the Wakefield Tower provides a short account of the history of torture at the tower and has some life-size replicas, including one of the infamous rack. Of course, no visit to the Tower of London would be complete without seeing the Crown Jewels, which attract millions of visitors every year. The Jewel House at the tower has been used for the secure storage of these precious ceremonial objects, including the imperial state crown, since the early 14th century. Although attempts have been made to steal the crown jewels from the tower, notably by Colonel Blood in 1671, none have succeeded. Unfortunately, you are not allowed to take photos of the crown jewels, so I've had to make do with this one from the internet. Our visit ended with the customary visit to the gift shop, where we bought postcards and souvenirs. And no, I did not buy a crown. In spite of the rain, we enjoyed our trip to the tower, and I would certainly recommend it to anyone who's interested in English history and traditions. Just make sure you take an umbrella. Since the first part of this episode is longer than usual, I'm not going to go through the vocabulary, though you can find a glossary in the accompanying PDF file on iTunes U. Instead, let's move straight on to the questions. I suggest you stop the recording to give yourself time to answer. And just don't answer yes or no, try to give as much information as possible. Okay, the first question is, have you ever been to London? If so, when did you go and what did you do there? Question 2. Would you like to visit the Tower of London? Question 3. Why do you think the Tower of London is so popular with tourists? Question 4. What other tourist attractions do you know in London? Question 5. How would you prepare for a trip to London? Question 6. What period of history are you most interested in? Question 7. What's the most interesting historical monument you have visited? Question 8. Which historical monument would you most like to visit? Question 9. How important is it to preserve historic buildings like the Tower of London? And question 10. What do you think we can learn by visiting historical monuments like the Tower of London? Right, that's the end of this lesson. I hope you found it useful, and I look forward to working with you again on another episode of Learn English with Photos.